Hello, welcome to today's Studio Armor Review. I'm going to go over my Wild Riders, which are from independent clans from Exodites. They represent the Hellions. Now in this video we're going to cover the tactics and why would you use Hellions, where do they make sense, where don't they. Essentially, Hellions are one of those units that most Dark Eldar players seem to put aside. And admittedly, there's some good reason for that. However, it's a tool within your toolbox. You don't use every tool equally in the jobs you do. And Hellions do have a place. You've got some options to kit them out, but even just the stock build does have a place in the army. Let's take a quick look before we actually get into the models and how they fit into the Exodite army. Let's look at the actual Hellions themselves. Okay, as we look at the stat line, you can see it's typical Eldar. Toughness 3, high initiative, good weapon skill. The weakness is obviously the only one attack, 2 for the Heliarch, which is a sergeant, and a 5-up armor save. The special rules are really no different than most of the Dark Eldar, except they do have hit and run, and they do have combat drugs like the Witches and Reavers. So you do have the opportunity potentially to increase the strength or toughness or attacks or weapon skills. There's a bunch of things you could possibly increase. In this review, we're going to talk about just an unmodified Hellion. So we're not going to take into account any of the combat drug effects in making our evaluation. We'll talk about how it might change things, but I want to keep it pretty stock because you can't rely on the particular combat drug effect you get. Now, what's odd about this war gear list is it has a close combat weapon and the Hellglaive, which is kind of strange because the Hellglaive is a two-handed weapon, so you don't get a benefit of having that second close combat weapon. And maybe there's an answer over here in the options for the unit. So, the base unit is 5. You can add up to 15 more, which is really good. The more, the better. Think in terms of Imperial Guard Blob Squad. The more you have, the better off you are. Same with Witches. You can make one a sergeant for 10 more points. Now he can have a Phantasm grenade launcher, which is something you could do. The problem is that we'll talk about the grenade launcher in a little bit, but it may not be worth the investment you have to make of 15 points. The Heliarch is the only one who can actually take weapon upgrades, and so he replaces the Hellglaive with a Splinter Pistol and Stun Claw or Power Sword or Agonizer. The problem with this is, again, you get that stranded close combat weapon. I'm not really certain what they're thinking. However, given the Heliarch, any of these is possibly a good choice. Stun Claw is probably a good investment, but I think the Power Sword and Agonizer are the better of the two. The Agonizer is good if you're going up against anything that has a toughness higher than 3. And Power Sword is good against anything, toughness 3 with a good armor save. That's the best way to look at it. Alright, so let's take a look then at how to use these. Okay, we're going to be talking about the Wild Riders, which are represent the Hellions, and how you'd use them in the army, and where do they fit in. Now you can see I've got 8 models. I don't have the full 10. I still have 2 more to build. I need more arms, well, bow arms. But anyway, I think I would like to have a maximum unit of 20. Here's some of the advantages of using Hellions. The first is that they're jump infantry. Now, a lot of people like to deep strike jump infantry, but I see just as many do what I think is even better, is start them on the table, and use that jump pack move to close combat quickly. So you can move 12 inches and then assault. If you think about a average assault roll is 7, and if you have fleet, I think the average actually bumps up to about a 9. So you've got a threat range of about 21 inches. That's pretty respectable. So you can hide them where you need to, maneuver them behind obstacles so that they don't draw a lot of fire, can't be hurt too much, and then pounce with that jump pack move. They don't need to use their jump packs in the close combat phase because they already have fleet. You don't need the jump pack to reroll. The only benefit you'd have for doing a jump pack move in the charge would actually be giving yourself the Hammer of Wrath. With Strength 3, it might not be that useful. Of course, once they receive Furious Charge from the Power from Pain or Combat Drugs benefit +1 Strength, then Hammer of Wrath might actually be something you might want to do. So don't throw it out completely, but just think about it. Your first preference should be using the jump pack to move across the board and get close to the opponent so that you can easily charge them. But now the problem is, what units should you really be charging? You don't want to send these against Space Marines. They're going to wound on a 4 because that gives them a +1 to the strength. The Space Marines get their full armor save, so you're not going to be doing much damage overall. However, against things such as orcs, smaller groups of orcs, and definitely guard, these are ideal. If you pit a squad of just 10 of these guys, one of them Heliarch, against a blob of 20, where there's 2 squads each with a sergeant, you'll charge in, you'll get first strike, and you'll end up with probably killing 9 on average, 9 soldiers guardsmen before they attack you back, and you might lose from the remainder 4. So with the leadership of 8 on their end, best case, subtract 5 for the difference in losses, they're saving on a 3. It's going to be very hard for you not to wipe that 20-man blob squad out with a unit of 10 Hellions. Now, going after blob squads may not be the best approach, given the fact that you are taking casualties. But if you go against something else, a little, what I'll call softer, still has armor 5, but think about you're going against the 10-man tactical or Imperial Guard squads. You're still going to do 9 wounds. They're going to have 1 guy left to attack you back with. Go after the heavy weapons teams. You're going to wipe those off the board before they even have a chance to attack you back. Those are really where you want to strike. If you can, strike at like the Ratlings and what have you, command squads, anything where you can get past their 5-up armor save. Now, command squad, you're going to have the 5-up invuln to worry about from the commander, but again, that's a 5-up. He's going to be failing 2/3 of the wounds that come his way. So you can put out a good amount of hurt from a 10-man Hellion squad with the Heliarch. Especially since you can go in with the splinter pods and take out a few wounds straight away. Remember, splinter pods are also AP 5, and they're poison. Well, poison is not really a benefit against guard because it's strength 1 as a weapon. But you're going to actually you'll still be able to wound half the time. It's AP 5 and it's 2 shots, so you're putting out 20 shots to soften up the target. About 14 will get through. Of those, 7 will wound, no armor saves, so you have to worry about the cover. So you could actually whittle down a pretty large squad very, very well with the splinter pods, which have an 18-inch range, and then charge in. So while Hellions are not useful across the board, they're not a must-include, they're very good if you go up against infantry-heavy guard armies. You will not be able to do anything against tanks with these, unless you do happen to have the combat drugs. Now, if you do the math, you have strength 3, Hellglaive gives you +1, so you're actually tough at strength 4. You could glance a vehicle to death, because most of them are rear armor 10. But that's not necessarily the best approach with these particular models. If you do have a +1 from the the combat drugs, get that +1 strength, that's probably not a bad idea, because then you're going to be glancing on 5s. So 1/3 of the hits that you score are going to do damage. So that's going to take out a tank pretty well. Again, well, let's look at this 10-man squad. You're looking at basically 21 attacks. 14 will hit, essentially 9 of those, 10 of those will actually get through. Sorry, not 10 of those. 4 of them, maybe 5 will get through. That's a tank gone right there. So if you have to, you could go against tanks with these guys as well. Probably not the best thing, but still they do have a use in that sense, especially if your Ravager's been taken out. So those are my thoughts on that particular, going against armor. When you look at the Blob Squad again, one thing you're going to run into is they're often you'll have a Ministerian Priest against in the midst of those 20 or 30 or 40 infantry. The problem you'll run into there is that all of a sudden they automatically pass their morale checks. They're not fearless, they just automatically pass their morale and leadership tests. That means you can't sweeping advance them. So going up against a squad with a Ministerian Priest may not be the best plan here. The biggest problem is, in a challenge, your Heliarch doesn't have that much going for him. Because when he still has only 3 attacks. Yes, he's +1 strength, so he'll hit 2/3 of the time, wound 2/3 of the time. But the opponent, the Ministerian Priest, does get a 4-up invuln. So he could maybe take a wound, and he usually has 2 wounds to go. So it's really dangerous to do that. Because remember, if you go against a large Blob Squad, you're going to take more casualties that second round and really diminish the size of your Hellion squad. So my suggestion is to do what you can to whittle that down, go in for the attack, and don't challenge the opponent. Take out as many guard as you can and let the wounds basically fall onto the Ministerian Priest. It's the only way you're going to take out the Blob Squad. With let's reinforce that way. Now, if you're lucky, there'll be another way you can take out that priest. But going in with close combat is probably not the most efficient way of doing it. So you might want to avoid that. Again, the tactical situation is going to differ based on what the rest of your list looks like. So if you're going to include Hellions, you should already be able to, in your list, handle the armored infantry. Those with armor 4 or better. Vehicles, so Ravagers, even disintegrated cannons. Cannons will be good on the Raiders, what have you. That will give you the ability to, round out your list and put out a lot of fire from other things besides the Hellions. Hellions do get kind of pricey with a larger squad, and it's a matter of, if you want to put your points elsewhere, you think there's a better way, by all means do so. Hellions they're not shining stars. They do have a place. And given the choice between witches and these, I think I would prefer the Hellions for this one reason only. Witches have to rely on a transport to get close quickly. The Hellions don't. They can move 12 inches with their jump back, or their Hellion skyboard, and get into close combat range pretty quickly. And they don't die to an exploding vehicle. Witches only have a 6-up save, so 2/3 of the witches are going to be wounded by the explosion, and only 1/6 of those are going to survive. So it's kind of difficult to recommend witches when you're trying to send units quickly into the Imperial Guard lines. Yeah. Having said that, multiple smaller units. Hellions don't go with the minimum 5, go with 10, simply because you need the extra bodies to stay in combat for that second round to wipe out the rest of the opponent's squad at a minimum. The more of those you have, so 2 10s instead of 120 man squad would probably be a better approach, because that way if one does take a lot of damage and routes, the other one's still there. So in my particular list, with these, my Wild Riders I will add 2 more to them. I will probably leave it at that, and I will reserve these for when I fight against a couple Imperial Guard players I've got. And again, using the same tactics I just discussed, hiding them, moving them into position to attack the more dangerous squishy units like the heavy weapons units and the smaller squads. That's the way I'm looking at it. So let me know what you think below. Share, like, subscribe, please. And I'll see you in the next video. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.